Hi, Dr. Yass here. In this video, I want to talk about the psychological effects, not the physical effects, but the psychological effects of getting a positive diagnosis on an MRI, such as stenosis, or herniated disc, nerve root impingement, spondylolisthesis, all these very fancy terms that are associated with structural abnormalities of the spine. I'm sure it's scary enough that if you get a positive finding like a meniscal tear or a labral tear, these are kind of scary words, but they are related to joints that are associated with your extremities. But I think the great fear comes when people get positive findings associated with the spine. And it really couldn't have been any more evident than yesterday when I did a Zoom session with, quite shockingly, a 16-year-old girl who was told that her pain was associated with a herniated disc that was found in the lumbar spine on a MRI. And in talking to her, it became extremely evident to me that the word that I would use to describe her feeling about this positive finding was straight out unadulterated fear. This idea that this disc was herniated and existed and perpetually could increase, as described by the doctors who were trying to convince her that, in fact, that was her cause, really incited a sense of fear. And being 16, she has a whole life ahead of her. So you could imagine that the idea that this will just be sitting there almost as a ticking time bomb, in the same sense that cancer is described, which is the intent of the medical system, to give you the sense that structural variations exist and must require some sort of intervention. That is what leads to this incredible sense of fear and anguish and inability to focus on anything other than the structural variation identified, which is the intent of giving you the diagnosis. To be very clear, if I could just turn around and show you, her pain was below the line of the pelvis. Right here, this is the line of the pelvis. Her pain was below that. The lumbar spine's above it. The sacral spine is below it. Any pain below the line of the ridge of the pelvis indicates that it's in the gluteal region, and that is innervated by the sacral spine. So any pain in the gluteal region could not be created by a nerve root from the lumbar spine. So the diagnosis was 100% baseless based on her symptoms. It was impossible, absolutely impossible, to say that that herniation had anything to do with the cause of her pain. And yet, it was promoted as the cause and that it required some sort of intervention at 16 years old. Quite luckily, I had treated a relative who then led to me having the opportunity to work with this girl, and I was able to show her that quite clearly her pain was muscular-based, that in fact it was a muscle that had strained in the gluteal region, which was associated with the activity she was performing. We did some exercise, and I was able to show her that her functional capacity was improved upon completing the exercise, and I can guarantee you that her symptoms will simply dissolve as the muscles get strong enough to perform her activity without straining. But let's not basically convince ourselves that the intent of the diagnosis that's given is to instill fear. That is, without question, the key to what is going on globally. The intent is to make you think that structural variations are just like cancer. They exist and require an intervention to address them, period. This is a complete fallacy. From a historical perspective, you would be interested to know that post-mortem studies from the 1950s. The person was dead and they did an autopsy, and it showed that over 40% of the population had herniated discs, and yet nobody was experiencing pain. What I pointed out to this girl is more recent studies have shown that over the age of 60, more than 90% of people who have no back pain were found to have bulging or degenerative discs. 90%. So this idea that somehow, because a structural variation was identified, it requires some sort of intervention is pure, unadulterated crap. The reality is that before anyone even had an MRI or could identify these structural variations, they existed throughout life for people. They never created a symptom, never required an intervention, and guess what? People died with the herniation. Now, 90% of people with no back pain have structural variations, herniated or bulging or degenerative discs. Don't buy in to the fear. Don't buy into the fear. It is baseless. It is not a medical position. It is a cultural position with the intent of developing an industry that grew since the advent of the MRIs, trying to promote the idea that surgery is a requirement because a structural variation is identified. This is pure, unadulterated nonsense. There isn't one iota of medical proof. This is purely cultural. Please, please, please do not buy into the fear. I was so happy to have had the opportunity to discuss the issue with this 16-year-old girl and calmed her fears and let her know she is in control of her body and that the identification of the disc had nothing to do with anything, and she will go on the rest of her life with a herniated disc, and it will do nothing in terms of creating symptoms or affect her ability to function. And more importantly, I explained that it was the weakness and muscular imbalance that led to her pain that also led to the disc herniating. That in fact, if she had had strength and balance, the forces of gravity would have run directly through the center of her spine and the disc would remain intact, exactly where it should be. So this idea that it's somehow magical and just exists is pure nonsense. There is a cause to it, and if you want to, if for some reason you feel you want to make sure that you never have a herniated disc or stenosis or a meniscal tear or arthritis, get strong, have your muscles be balanced, make sure that the forces of gravity run directly through the centers of your joints, and there'll be no variation to the structures of those joints. Please, please understand. There is a logical understanding as to why herniated discs exist and all these other structural variations. And the fact is that throughout the history of mankind, they have existed without even being identified, without anyone having any kind of symptom, and therefore without anyone requiring any type of intervention. Don't buy into the fear. It is cultural. It is developing an industry. It is meaningless. All right. So if you like this video, hopefully it's making sense to you. Please give it a thumbs up. If you like what I'm putting out on my YouTube channel, Dr. Mitchell Yass, please subscribe. In getting a subscription, you'll get notifications when new videos are added or when I'm live on YouTube. And if you want to get in touch with me, you have a question regarding your situation, you can contact me on my email address, drmitch@mitchellyass.com, drmitch@mitchellyass.com, drmitch@mitchellyass.com. If you think that I can help in achieving a proper diagnosis and getting a proper treatment, and you'd like to set up a Skype or Zoom session, please do so through my email address, drmitch@mitchellyass.com. All right, folks, this is up to you. I am definitely getting more and more input from people coming to my YouTube channel, to my website. We are breaking through. Let's keep it going. Spread the gospel that something exists outside the medical system. That is the Yass method. So for now, this is Dr. Mitchell Yass wishing you a pain-free, fully functional life. Bye-bye for now.